Revenge Office Stories. I built the tool that became the absolute backbone of our company's success. It wasn't just some piece of software. It was a revolution that took our operations from the Stone Age into the future, and it was making the company an absolute fortune. When I walked into my annual review, armed with data, charts, and undeniable proof of my value, I asked for a raise that actually reflected my contribution. My director, a guy named David, looked me right in the eye, gave me this thin, dismissive smile, and told me my work just wasn't valuable enough. He thought he could pat me on the head, downplay my creation, and I'd just quietly take it. He thought he could dismiss me. He was dead wrong. See, he didn't know I had a secret, a crucial piece of my own history that predated my time at the company. I had come up with the core concepts for that revolutionary tool years before I ever walked through their office doors, and I had the old journals to prove it. And as it turned out, the boilerplate employment contract they had me sign was an outdated relic with a loophole in it the size of a truck. So I secretly filed a patent. I took control of the very intellectual property he so casually dismissed. And then I waited. I played the long game and orchestrated a quiet, systematic takedown that torpedoed a $400 million acquisition and completely dismantled his career, leaving him with absolutely nothing. This is the story of how I did it. And trust me, you're going to want to hear every last detail of the fallout. So if you believe in fighting for your own value and getting exactly what you deserve, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. The story only gets crazier from here. To really get how this all went down, you need to understand the company I worked for. Let's just call it Innovatech. I joined as a senior software engineer at 33. Innovatech was a mid-sized data analytics firm with a decent reputation, but it was fundamentally stuck. It was drowning in its own inefficiency. The whole business was built on processing massive, complex datasets for clients, but our internal systems were ancient. We were running on a patchwork of old software and manual processes that were slow, riddled with errors, and unbelievably expensive to maintain. The biggest problem, the one that was actively bleeding clients and costing millions, was our data onboarding pipeline. When we signed a new big-time client, it was supposed to be a celebration. For us, it was a fire drill. It would take a team of 6 engineers anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks of painstaking manual work just to get the client's data into our systems. It was a nightmare. It created this massive bottleneck that limited how many new clients we could even handle. The sales team would be popping champagne for a new contract while my department was groaning, knowing we were about to start another month-long death march. We were constantly behind, morale was in the gutter, and the executives were panicking because growth had completely flatlined. We were a data company that was terrible at handling data. The irony was suffocating. This was the mess I walked into. I saw the chaos and the frustration, but where everyone else saw a disaster, I saw an opportunity. I saw the puzzle, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I already had the key. In my spare time, long before I'd even heard of Innovatech, I'd been working on a personal project. It was more of a theoretical framework, an obsession, really. I had notebooks filled with diagrams and pseudocode, all centered around a new concept for automated data mapping. It was a system designed to intelligently analyze different data structures and create a unified, functional schema on the fly. I called it Project Chimera. To me, it was an elegant solution to a very messy problem, but it was just a concept living in my journals and on a personal hard drive. When I saw the chaos at Innovatech, it was like a light bulb went off. Their disaster was the perfect, real-world test case for Chimera. I started quietly on my own time, adapting my theoretical work to Innovatech's specific problems. I spent my nights and weekends building a fully fledged, enterprise-grade tool. This wasn't some simple script. It was a modular, scalable engine that could ingest almost any kind of data and seamlessly integrate it. After about 6 months of obsessive work, I had a working prototype. I showed it to my immediate manager, not David, but a lower-level guy who was constantly stressed by the pipeline. His jaw practically hit the floor. We ran a test on a small client dataset. A process that normally took 2 engineers a full week was done by Chimera in under 2 hours, with 0 errors. The rollout was fast. Within a year, Chimera wasn't just a tool, it was the tool. The central nervous system of the company. The before and after was staggering. Our client onboarding time dropped from an average of 3 weeks to a single afternoon. Our capacity for new business exploded. We went from onboarding a couple of major clients a quarter to over a dozen. The sales team started using Chimera as their primary selling point. It was the company's silver bullet. Revenue soared, the company's valuation skyrocketed, and I was the one who built it from the ground up. Which brings us to my annual performance review with David, the director of engineering. David was a master of corporate politics. He was charismatic and knew how to talk to the C-suite. He had a real talent for positioning himself next to success, and ever since Chimera took off, he'd been basking in its glow, presenting my metrics at board meetings as if he'd written the code himself. I walked into his office feeling confident. I had a detailed presentation showing the reduction in man-hours, the increase in client capacity, the direct link between Chimera and the company's insane revenue growth. My case was ironclad. I laid it all out. I explained that based on the tool's impact, I believed my compensation should be adjusted. I wasn't asking for a token 5% bump. I was asking for a significant raise that recognized me as a principal contributor to the company's success. David listened, leaning back in his expensive chair with a patient, almost fatherly smile. When I finished, he steepled his fingers. "This is great," he said, gesturing at my printouts. "Really great stuff. The team has done some wonderful work." The team, not you. Red flag number 1. Then he launches into this pre-canned speech about budgets, corporate structures, and fairness. Then came the final blow. He leaned forward, his smile turning condescending. "Look," he began, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "It's a nice little program, it really is. It's definitely helped with efficiency." He paused. "But let's be realistic. The real value is in our client relationships, our sales strategy. That's what drives the business. Your contribution, while helpful, isn't really at a strategic level. The raise you're asking for is simply not justifiable." I was stunned. A nice little program? Not strategic? The tool that had single-handedly resurrected the company was being brushed off as a helpful utility. He was looking at the goose that laid the golden egg and telling it the eggs weren't really all that important. The feeling that washed over me wasn't just anger. It was a cold, clarifying betrayal. He wasn't just denying my raise. He was deliberately erasing my value. He was taking credit for my revolution while telling me I was just a cog in the machine. I just nodded, collected my papers, and said, "I understand." But as I walked out of his office, the quiet, compliant employee he thought I was died right there. He had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He had given me my motivation. The war had begun, and he didn't even know he was the enemy. The walk from David's office back to my desk was a blur. The condescending tone of his voice echoed in my head. A nice little program. By the time I got home, the anger had cooled into something much more dangerous. Cold, hard resolve. He didn't think my work was valuable? Fine. I would show him, the board, and the entire world exactly what it was worth. Quitting was what he expected. It would have been a quiet surrender. No, I wasn't going to run. I was going to fight, but not on his terms. That night, I went through a dusty storage box in my closet and pulled out my old journals. My heart was pounding as I flipped through them. And then I found it. A series of entries dated 5 years before I started at Innovatech. Page after page of detailed notes, diagrams, and architectural sketches of Project Chimera. It was raw, but it was undeniably the genesis of the tool. I had dated every single entry. It was a perfect record of prior conception. Next, I dug up my original employment agreement. I had skimmed it at the time, like most people do. Now, I read every single word. I spent the entire weekend with that document. Most of it was standard stuff. Confidentiality, non-compete, and the IP clause saying anything developed during the course of employment belonged to the company. Then, late on Sunday night, I found it. Tucked away in a section about employee obligations was a small, almost forgotten paragraph. Paragraph 7. It was likely copy-pasted from a much older contract. It contained language about pre-existing, independently conceived, and documented intellectual property. The clause said an employee had to declare such pre-existing IP in writing when they were hired to have it be exempt. I hadn't done that, of course. But, and this was crucial, the clause was poorly worded. It didn't explicitly state that failure to declare waived the employee's rights. It was a tiny crack in their legal armor, and I had the journals to prove prior conception. This sloppy, overlooked paragraph was my loophole. The next morning, I took a personal day and met with an IP lawyer, a bulldog known for complex employee-inventor cases. I walked into his office with my journals, my contract with paragraph 7 highlighted, and a full demo of Chimera. I laid out the whole story. The lawyer, a sharp man named Mr. Kane, was skeptical at first. He explained that employers almost always win these disputes. But then I showed him my dated journals. I walked him through the timeline. Then I showed him paragraph 7. He read the clause twice. A slow smile spread across his face. Well, well, he said, this is sloppy. Very, very sloppy of them. He said that while the company would fight it, we had a strong, defensible position. My documented pre-existing work, combined with their badly drafted contract, gave us a legitimate claim. The plan we hatched was a quiet war. First, on his advice, I formed an LLC. We called it Triton Innovations LLC, a simple, anonymous-sounding shell with me as the sole unlisted owner. This was critical. It created a legal shield. It wouldn't be me versus my employer, but Triton Innovations asserting its IP rights. Back at work, I put on an Oscar-worthy performance. I was helpful, diligent, and never mentioned the raise. I flew completely under the radar. I even took the lead on creating new, extensive documentation for Chimera. Every new manual and diagram they created detailing the tool's importance was, in effect, more evidence for my future case. David saw this as me accepting my place, occasionally giving me a patronizing nod. He had no idea he was a fly caught in a web slowly being woven around him. With the LLC in place, Mr. Kane and I began the patent process. The first step was filing a provisional patent application with the USPTO. Kane explained this was like planting a flag. It established an official priority date for the invention and gave us a patent pending status. This bought us a year to file the formal, non-provisional application, all while the application itself remained hidden from the public. I paid for all the legal fees myself, routing them through the LLC. That year was the most stressful of my life. By day, I was a senior engineer at Innovatech, maintaining the tool they thought they owned. By night, I was the CEO of Triton Innovations, working with my lawyer to draft the patent. We described every facet of Chimera's architecture, referencing my old journals as proof of conception. All the while, David was climbing the corporate ladder to vice president, largely on the back of Chimera's success. He gave talks at conferences about Innovatech's culture of innovation, never once mentioning my name. Every bonus he cashed was more fuel for my fire. Just before the one-year deadline, we filed the formal, non-provisional patent application. This was the real deal. Kane warned me this was the start of the long haul. The examination process could take years. But the crucial part of the strategy was this. After 18 months from our initial filing, the application itself would become public. It would appear in the USPTO's public database for anyone to find. That's when the trap would be sprung. The next 18 months were a masterclass in patience. At work, Innovatech was thriving, hailed as a major disruptor. And just as Kane predicted, the rumors started. A major tech conglomerate, a titan we'll call OmniCorp, was sniffing around for an acquisition. The rumored price tag was a staggering $400 million. The company went into a frenzy, and who was front and center, leading the technical presentations for the buyers? Vice President David. He was selling the company's future, and the entire valuation was propped up by one single asset, the proprietary technology of Project Chimera. He was selling a crown jewel that he didn't know was already promised to someone else. My heart was in my throat for weeks. This was it, the moment everything had been building towards. On a quiet Tuesday morning, my patent application, filed by Triton LLC, was officially published by the USPTO. It was now a public record, a digital landmine, sitting silently in a government database. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for the boom. When a company like OmniCorp decides to spend $400 million, they conduct what's called due diligence. It's a corporate colonoscopy. They scrutinize every contract, every financial statement, and most importantly, every piece of intellectual property. They need to be sure they know what they're buying. I knew this was where the landmine was. OmniCorp's IP lawyers would, as standard procedure, run comprehensive searches on the USPTO database. They wouldn't just search for patents filed by Innovatech. They'd search for the technology itself, using keywords and technical descriptions. They were looking for precisely what I had planted. The days turned into a week, then two. The tension was unbearable. I watched David stride through the office, oozing confidence. He was on the verge of the biggest triumph of his life. A successful acquisition meant a massive payday and a powerful new role at OmniCorp. He was a king surveying a kingdom he was about to sell for a fortune. I kept my head down, my face a mask of neutrality. Inside, my stomach was a knot of anxiety. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I was living on a knife's edge, waiting for the explosion I had so carefully engineered. The call didn't come to me. It came to Mr. Kane. It was a Thursday afternoon. OmniCorp's lead IP counsel had found it. They had found the pending patent application from an unknown entity, Triton LLC, that described with perfect detail the exact architecture of Chimera. The acquisition process didn't just hit a speed bump. It slammed into a brick wall at 100 miles an hour. As Kane later told me, OmniCorp's reaction was immediate and brutal. All negotiations were frozen. The deal was on life support until this critical IP ownership conflict could be resolved. A red flag this big suggested two possibilities, both catastrophic. Either Innovatech's most valuable asset was built on stolen tech, or they had such poor internal controls that they didn't even own their own crown jewels. An emergency top-level meeting was convened with Innovatech's CEO, the board, and the furious lawyers from OmniCorp. And, of course, they summoned Vice President David, the man who had been the face of the technology, to explain. I can only imagine the cold dread that washed over him. He probably thought it was a final negotiation. Instead, he was met with stone-faced lawyers holding a printout of my patent application. They asked him a simple question. What is Triton LLC, and why have they filed a patent for the tool you told us was your proprietary property? David, for the first time in his charmed career, had no answer. He was completely blindsided. He stammered. He blustered, likely dismissing it as a patent troll. But Mr. Kane had already contacted OmniCorp's legal team and provided a high-level summary of our position. The prior conception, the dated journals, the contract, loophole. OmniCorp's lawyers, being ruthlessly pragmatic, saw the strength of our claim. They didn't care about the drama. All they saw was a massive risk to their $400 million investment. The deal was dead in the water until Innovatech could deliver clean title to the IP. And they couldn't. David's downfall wasn't a loud, theatrical firing. The corporate world is rarely that dramatic. It was a quiet, cold, and utterly brutal removal. He was exposed in the most humiliating way possible. His incompetence was laid bare. He had either been grossly negligent in not securing the company's most vital IP, or he had concealed the issue, which constituted fraud. Either way, he was radioactive. The board didn't yell. They simply lost all faith in him. The $400 million deal, his crowning achievement, was now a smoldering crater, and he was the one holding the match. The first sign was when his name disappeared from the internal company directory. Then his picture vanished from the Our Team page on the website. A bland email went out from the CEO announcing that David was taking a leave of absence to pursue other opportunities, corporate speak for, "You're fired and don't let the door hit you on the way out." His access cards were deactivated. His unvested stock options, which would have been worth millions, evaporated. His career in this industry was over. No one would hire a VP who oversaw the loss of a company's core IP during a 9-figure deal. He was untouchable. With David gone and the OmniCorp deal hanging by a thread, Innovatech was desperate. They had to come to the table, but they weren't negotiating with me, their disgruntled engineer. They were forced to negotiate with Triton LLC, the legal entity that held all the cards. The day after David was disappeared, I walked into the CEO's office and formally resigned, giving my standard 2 weeks' notice. The look on his face was a mixture of shock, dawning comprehension, and grudging respect. He knew. The negotiations that followed were handled entirely by Mr. Kane. Innovatech's lawyers tried to fight, but they had no leverage. Their entire company and the OmniCorp deal were hostage to my patent. My LLC entered into a long-term, exclusive licensing agreement with Innovatech. The terms were staggering. I received a massive 7-figure upfront payment to grant them the immediate right to use the tool and salvage their deal. On top of that, the agreement included a significant percentage of ongoing revenue as a royalty, paid quarterly. The first royalty check alone was more than 10 times the annual raise David had denied me. I was no longer an employee. I was the owner, licensing my technology back to the very company that told me my work wasn't valuable. The acquisition did eventually go through, but for a slightly reduced price, and only after my licensing agreement was firmly in place. My revenge was complete. David was gone, his reputation destroyed, and I, the not strategic engineer, was now financially independent, running my own technology licensing company. I had turned his arrogance into my greatest asset. So that's how a single, condescending conversation led me to quietly dismantle a director's career and build my own enterprise. It was never just about the money, though the money is certainly nice. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming ownership of my own ideas and my own value. David's biggest mistake wasn't just underestimating my tool. It was underestimating me. He believed my worth was his to define. The lesson here is a powerful one. Never let anyone else tell you what you are worth. Your value is yours to prove. And sometimes the best way to do that isn't to argue. It's to quietly and strategically build your own kingdom on the very ground they refuse to give you. You just have to be willing to play the long game. What do you think? Was it a proportionate response, or did I go too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button and subscribe for more.